All right, so it's 12:15. We'll go ahead and begin. Good afternoon and welcome to the Alfred University Bergren Forum. My name is John D'Angelo and I am a professor of chemistry and the coordinator and host for the spring 2025 season of the Bergren Forum. This is episode 7. Today's date is Thursday, March 20th, 2025, and for those of you attending the forum online, here in Western New York, it is a gray, overcast day with threats of afternoon rain, but inside Nevins Theater of the Powell Campus Center, it is dry and the coffee and tea are hot and free. Before starting, we have a few announcements. First, next Thursday's forum will be given by Ray Yanakos. Ray's talk will be on breaking the stereotype of the shushing librarian. There are some other events coming up to announce. Tomorrow, the spring semester Pondering Pedagogy series continues at 12:20 in Olin 400 and Tuesday at 4:30 in the same room and will be about emotions in the classroom. The 2025 Riley Lecture in Women's and Gender Studies will take place Monday, March 24th at 5:30 right here in Nevins. This year's presenter is Ukrainian-American film director Roxy Toporowicz. Tomorrow from 12 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the Joyce Walton Center, there will be the Spring 2025 Career Bash. Attend to check out co-op, internship, and both part and full-time position opportunities for Alfred University students. Tomorrow night from 5 until 6:30, there will be a puzzle and craft night at the Judson Leadership Center in celebration of Women's History Month. Later today at 4:30 in this very room, Young Mi Lee will be giving the Randall Chair Lecture. There is an opening reception for a new exhibit by first-year MFA graduate candidates in the Robert C. Turner Gallery tonight from 6 until 8 p.m. The exhibit will close on March 28th. Finally, congratulations to Wayne Higbee, who is to receive the Smithsonian Visionary Award for 2026 in ceremonies connected to the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. Without further ado, today's forum will be given by Matias Homar, Alfred University Visiting Assistant Professor of Music Sound Studio. The title of the talk is Composing Beyond Boundaries, Enactive Composition as a Social and Personal Endeavor. The floor is yours.
Hello, how are you? Good? Okay. So thank you so much. This is great to be here. A very interesting, time for me because I'm really kind of experimenting with my own experimentations in a way. So this presentation will be a little bit of that. So what you can see my hand here, it's part of this whole process that I've been doing for about 5 years now. So I am in the process, I guess, I hope, on becoming, something that I was not 5 years ago. And hopefully it will be something better, kind of thing. So anyways, the idea of this talk is, just to kind of share a very complicated process of what I have been struggling with, I could say my whole life in terms of being a composer, being an artist, but more than anything, just being a human being. And so how that reflects in my own composition and my own social kind of interaction or actions wherever I am, right? So this idea of enactive or enactivism comes from people that has been studying cognitive sciences for many, many years. And the people that I'm interested in are Varela, Thompson, and Rush. And they did a research, they actually published a book about this, which is the one I'm using, in 1991. So it's a very many years, but even at that time, they were already talking about artificial intelligence. So that was very interesting to me because of the nature of things that I do with technology. So, there you go. So that's the book. This is, there you go. That's the book. And this is the version in Spanish. The original version is in English because Varela, who is a Chilean biologist and philosopher, he was studying at Harvard at that moment, or maybe a few years before that. But in any event, this amazing trio actually published this book, which is very, very interesting. If you don't know it, I highly encourage you to, take a look and see what they say. But kind of this, some precepts, or I didn't want to say main concepts, but about enactivism is that it's highly based on lived experiences. So it's not something that, we just analyze from an objective point of view, but we actually become part of that thing that we are observing. And so that's actually what they say, and what I believe as well, is that that's how we actually interact in the world. We are not passive observers, even though sometimes we want to be, at the back and not saying anything, but just by being there, we are part of that whole experience. So that's one thing. And then, of course, because of that, they say that this is something that we embody in our own bodies. And so everything that goes through our bodies, it's part of that same experience. And so every reflection that we have in terms of, like the smells that we feel, or the touch, or any of the senses that we use, will be part of our embodied experience in terms of how we interact with the world. So because they also focus on Buddhism, which is also very interesting to me in a personal level, they start kind of going away from just this objective point of view, that it's just like a scientific person just doing a scientific analysis and observing the data, but they are actually, in some ways, also involving their own body and their own experience in that same observation. So why they bring the Buddhist aspect to their own research is because they are very focused on this idea of just the impermanence, meaning that nothing is constant, but everything actually changes, and that involves all the senses. And in the Buddhist perspective, there are 6 senses and not 5, because they also consider the mind to be one of the sensorial organs that we have. So that's why they put the idea of physical, but also the mental, and because of everything it's intertwined together, there's an emotional aspect of it, that we cannot detach ourselves from that. We can, try to do it, but at some point we won't be able to fully, do that. So the other thing that's very important to them is this idea of the context. So a context could be this room, could be outside, could be the entire world, could be the universe, could be any type of space or any type of circumstances where we are, interacting. And so what they really focus on is on this idea that there is an interrelationship between the object of observation and the observer. But this is not just a dual observation. This also has a third component, which is that interaction between those two components, right? So you have the observer, you have the object of observation, but then you have the interaction between those two. And so that will define and make a difference in terms of what will be the results of whatever you are reflecting on, observing, and analyzing. So in that sense, they do focus on this idea of symbols, and how symbols are just, conventions that we come up with as human beings, basically, to name things that they will gain a significance that will depend on wherever that symbol is being born, but also where that symbol actually travels to. So, in terms of many things that are going around the world, right, I was thinking and reflecting about this idea of what does immigration mean to different places. And that's just a word that it's a very heavy word at this moment, right? But it has different implications in different spaces. So for me, as an immigrant from South America, has a very strong, meaning in terms of why someone wants to leave their country of origin and why someone wants to go to somewhere in specific. And at the same time, the people that it's from that place in specific have a very strong understanding of immigration as well. So the thing is, what they say in that way is that if we focus on just our own conceptions of what those words mean, then the problem becomes that we are just focused on just one aspect of that situation. So we have to overcome that, and that's being aware of the impermanence aspect of everything. So that's why, constant change. And then because of this, they kind of name this idea as an inactive being, an active self that is within this interaction of these many different components. And so this is what actually distinguishes them from just the more traditional cognitive sciences perspective. So this is one of two excerpts from the book that they mention. And so basically they are just talking about this idea of the symbols, that they are crossed by daily actions in the world, and they help create the history of said actions. And so that's where the context comes into the play. And so they put together context with history, but sometimes they could represent different things. The history of something could be different from the context in terms of how we perceive the thing. If we go into more this, detached kind of perception, then we can see that those two things are not actually separated, but they are just part of the one same thing. And so the other thing is that we enact the world, and the mind departing from the actions that take place in the world. When they mention this, is this idea that we ourselves put our own bodies, our own selves, as part of the interactions that happen in the world, whatever they may be. And so those interactions are the ones that will definitely or ultimately create the symbols that will put meaning into the different actions, right? Because that's how we kind of actually do, usually, as human beings. We have certain things that we do, we establish a way of doing it, and then we name it. It's kind of rare that it happens the opposite way, that we name something and then we figure out how the action has to take place to become that thing. So in that sense, this has been kind of informing my own self-practice as a composer, musician. So I'd say that the first piece, full piece that I composed with this idea of the enactment and how to put the actions to make meaning out of them, and how those actions are in a kind of confined context, and that context has different components. In this case, what I was playing around is this idea of the sound being the object, the performer being the observer, and the interaction between them, mediated by technology, will create this inactive world. So it's really dependent on how do I interact with the sound because of the reactions of the sound that makes me react in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. Anyway, so we will just listen a little bit of this. So just because the recording is not very good, but you can see that the person in charge of the camera is really focusing on my foot. And that's because I'm controlling the sound with my foot, right? And so the intention with this piece was to really explore how much can I react to what I perceive as randomness, right? Because I don't really have control of the sound. It's the sound is happening, my foot is moving with different, sensors, and that is modifying the sound in different ways. So the idea was to put myself in this kind of a state of mind where I just be able to react to what I'm perceiving without any kind of judgment, saying, this is good, this is bad, just like reacting and try to follow my kind of natural, with many quotation marks, feelings or, sensations or emotions even. So that taking it a little bit further with a small ensemble, I did the same thing, but I did put a bunch of processing sounds on the whole ensemble, just picking the sound with just one microphone. And what you see on the bottom there, that yellow-orange kind of granular cloud of things, that is how the body of the person in charge of the electronics is activating the sensor. So that sensor will activate different effects that will modify the sound in, live processing sound of the ensemble. So basically the idea is that the impulses received from the different instruments will have kind of an echo and distorted sound that will be defined by the person reacting to those sounds. So going back to this idea of what I mentioned before of putting myself in this state, of kind of mindfulness, awareness, the idea is that the enactivism is really focused on the self, but not, removed from everything else, but that self being part of that, right? And so the idea is that this concept of the oneness of body and mind, it's really a reflection on basically whatever we do will have an effect. So this idea of the law of cause and effect, right? And so every single action that we do, that we take, will have an effect. How that effect will be determined on the type of actions that we take. When we are talking about music, I think we cannot do any harm with music. You can like it or dislike it, but in a way, what I'm trying to do is like just becoming more and more aware of the causes I'm making throughout the process of like composing music, so I can really enjoy the causes of that, the result of that, and just feel like happy with that, okay? So in a way, the idea is that, the art is not gonna be ever finished completely, because you can always have, with the same materials, different actions that you can take. Therefore, the result can be different. Of course, because of the way I'm working with the music, I have some parameters that will be the same all the time. And so they will give you certain sounds that will be the same, even if it's a different person performing or in a different situation. But that's, what I consider also that happens in life as well, right? So we have some elements that go around and that we make them our own, and because of that, we might seem similar to this and that. And so that's where the part of becoming part of a collective it kind of forms itself, right? Because we share these common things, these common traits, and then because of that, we are part of a collective, but those collective doesn't mean that we cannot be our own selves, okay? I hope the experiment is going kind of well. But anyway, so one of the things that I was thinking about when I was composing all these different songs, different pieces, is this idea of diversity. And so how much we can profit from embracing diversity instead of rejecting it. Because then when we embrace the diversity, then we can accept that what we do as human beings, but as composers, it's not necessarily like the sacred word, and that has to be the thing, but we can actually embrace that there are different opinions, different, perspectives, different ways to approach the similar problems. So in that sense, I feel like, what I'm trying to do now, it's kind of, or for the last 5 years, is really detach myself from the more traditional compositional process, which is you have to respect, the range of the instrument, whatever the instrument can do. Of course, there are limitations. You cannot ask an instrument to perform something it's not possible physically. But just trying to have different approaches on how to create the sound that instrument can play. And so in that process, what I really discovered is that by including technology, that kind of free a little bit more, the preconceptions. Because the technology, the way at least I, propose that we use it in the pieces that I work, is to be just open to the unexpected. And so just kind of setting the mindset in a different kind of working environment in a way, which is not something that I created or anything. It's just, has been around different composers. You can think of Lageman, you can think of, I don't know, so many people, Pauline Oliveros, and so many other people. But it's just like my own kind of approach within the same traits, right? The same things that I'm getting from this collective that I feel I belong to, in a way. So, there you go. So now I just want to show a few excerpts from what has been becoming from this project in a kind of bigger, broader picture. So starting from that shoe that has the sensors going into the contraption that many of you already know, which is this, touchless MIDI device, and into the glove. So I've been trying to focus on, okay, so this is good for my art, but what can this do to others as well? So in that process, I've been working with dancers, the best dancers, and
musician, composer, and developer.
So that's the contraption. I don't really need. So I just want to show you, that's the contraption. And the idea is that the different sensors will react, but then the main purpose of this instrument is to really use the full body in the experience of creating that music. So what I have been doing with the different dancers is to see what type of movements they can make out of that, right? So this is the part of the audience participants that they are doing a complete different set of movements that the dancers have not done before. So the other aspect is that I want to try it out with a more kind of pedagogical situations, more social engagement. So I did try this with the Buffalo String Works, which is a youth orchestra in Buffalo, and the experience itself was amazing. And so what I can say from many, many different, situations where I tried out this instrument is that kids used to be more flexible to just like the unexpected, and they will just create much more genuine kind of gestures. Not that the adults, we cannot do it, we need more time. It's like we need to deconstruct ourselves, let's say, so to speak. The kids are just like kind of, they just go for it. So in this experience, they were, given like a a very brief explanation on how this worked, and then they were trying it out. The other thing that we did for the first time is to try some lasers that will create some visual effects on the back, which was very interesting. You can see that there. This has evolved very much thanks to a good friend of mine, Angela Lopez. And this is a different situation where people with mobility issues were, trying out the instrument and see how they could interact with it. So what you can see just very limited motion, right? But at the same time, the satisfaction of just creating the music, making the sounds out of it, it's immense. And to me, that was a really great gratification. So what I'm trying to say is that, by myself being kind of more aware of my interactions with the context, the world, the history, the people around me, I was able to just think out of the box, or at least out of my own box of what a composer should be, right? And so now I find myself in these type of situations. So this is a graph that I made out of, just kind of really trying to understand enactivism and that, And so the idea is that, we have the thoughts, we have the actions, we have symbols, we have emotions that makes up of history and the context that goes into some kind of manifestation, but that is constantly feeding back each other. And so that's what I believe creates the awareness. If we can trace back, not literally or super kind of concrete, but we can trace back somehow how this feedback is actually making us grow, or if we are kind of avoiding that, and so we are not really growing in a way. So that's part of the embodied experience. And so what is the important thing to me, this is not, the authors of the book, but they do mention a lot about the present moment. And again, it's going back to this idea of the impermanence. And when we focus on the impermanence, we can really suffer. That's, literally what they say, and that's something also that Buddhism talks about. So if we always focus on what is constantly changing, then we are not focusing on anything. And so we just keep an idea of that thing that happened, that we actually happened, but we just stay with that only moment and we just not move forward. And so that what creates our suffering, and that kind of avoids, doesn't help us to be part or just enact our own self in a way. So the idea is to just be present, recognize impermanence. We don't have to deny it, but we have to really acknowledge it. And so that will actually help us break from these all self-limitations that we put ourselves in. So another idea that really helped me through this process is Rodolfo Kusch, who is an Argentinian philosopher, that he talks a lot about contemplating landscape in the terms of here we are in Alfred, and Alfred has a history. I only got here a few months ago, but if I contemplate the landscape in the sense of trying to be aware of the people that inhabit this place, the nature that is around us, try to understand how the development of the city, happened, I can understand much more deeper, right? The meaning, the purpose, the history, the emotions, everything that happens here. So with that idea, he says that we can actually contemplate the landscape in so many different levels that doesn't necessarily need to be just in the more literal term of the landscape, which is, the landscape, but just to actually contemplate what happens historically in the context of each individual and each situation, so we can give meaning to that and see how we fit into that thing because of our interactions. So this comes to this idea of there are limitless possibilities, and when we are the enacting self, we can come to this realization that there is an internal thing, an external thing, they feedback each other, and we are part of that process. We are not away from that, whatever we are doing. So in that sense, this is the GEP project that came about with all these different instruments that I'm developing. And so the idea of the awareness is an integral part of this. So what I just want to do in the last 5 minutes I have is, if I have this right, sorry, is I'm going to ask my secret participant to do it. So what Chase has, thanks so much Chase, is an interactive ball that will create sound depending on how you move it. Thank you. Yes. I will just turn it off for a minute. Yeah, okay, thank you. So just kind of to finish the portion of my presentation is like, I want to ask, Chase, what was your experience? What were you expecting?
I didn't have the expectations, but I felt like it is something funny with time because you do have to stay present to make your choice of what you're doing and what you're listening to at the same time or close.
Yeah.
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 So you're responding and making kind of happen.
Yeah. And haven't you heard the sound before? How does that affect your perception or how you react to the sound?
Say the question.
Because you haven't heard the sound before. So we didn't prepare this. So how is your perception with that sound? Were you expecting to have that type of sound or?
Well, you just said you were going to throw me a ball.
Yes.
I thought to keep me awake. So I didn't know it was going to do that.
Yeah, and so how that new sound, let's say, affects your interaction in terms of, are you trying to discover?
I wanted more, I wanted to see what it would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to find out what does something like this sound like versus something like this versus something like this. And I think because of that too, you have to be really present to be able to want to make
Yes.
all these different sounds.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically, thank you so much, the idea of, this thing that Chase just said of being present, being aware, right? And so how do we experience that experience itself?
Yeah.
How do we perceive that? And so again, it's this idea, the Vijnana, it's a Sanskrit term that means awareness. And so the subject, the object, and the reality that links both subject and object. And that what Buddhists call the middle way, basically. There is not just a dual thing, this or that, but it's really what goes in the middle. And how do you make a sense out of that by going through the middle, basically. And just to finish quickly, but they do talk about this enactivism as making possible to have a more compassionate interaction in the world, because you become more aware of yourself, but at the same time you try to be more aware of whatever is around you. So to just be more mindful about those interactions as well. So this is one of the quotes, and with this I will just say thank you so much. And I don't know if there are time for questions or something. Yeah. So if anybody has.
Yay!
was very interesting and enlightening. I just have a question relative to a technical kind of question for the contraption, because as I saw it in play, it reminded me of the theremin. And so I was wondering if this is like the 21st century theremin, or are some of your principles based on that?
Yeah.
Because I know that the theremin evolved quite a bit. It was used a lot in the 70s, even through the 80s and 90s to create different kinds of sounds for like movies and things. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
like multiple theremins.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did not get inspiration directly from the theremin because it does work differently in the sense of the theremin's by radio waves, basically. And this is just like digital data that I decide how to convert that into whatever I want. But it does have a similar, kind of way of working with it, which I feel like indirectly I was influenced by the theremin on just how to understand the movement. But the interesting thing is that, especially with kids, they don't move that way. They will just put their heads, and they will just they don't think of it as just being two things of the same thing, but just like each sensor, they try to make them do different things. So, and on that note, there has been so many people developing new versions of the theremin. Like you have Moog that it's doing the digital version of it, and then many people that created like just more modern technology theremins in a way. So, yeah. Hello.
That was so fascinating, thank you. I was wondering about your source, the trio of writers.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, like, if in that source they're exploring people in the performing arts and the connection with mindfulness and compassion, or if that is like, or if others are exploring that, because it does totally make sense, like the ephemeral nature of the performing arts and the impermanence. So I just wondered if like any of them are grounded in the arts, or they're all more in the sciences. I just don't know anything about that book.
So at the time of that book, they did not anything with performing arts. They do have one chapter of the book that talks about color and how we perceive color. And I think they did ask, people in the visual arts for some guidance on that. They are not related to art in any way. As I said, Varela, it's a biologist and philosopher. Thompson, I think it's a philosopher. And Rush is either a biologist or I can't remember exactly, but they are not grounded on art. I don't know the later books that they wrote just together or even separately, they might have talked about art in some ways, because many people relate this to art.
It's like a very natural connection.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Could you show us more about your gloves?
Yes.
We're very curious about this. Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture.
Yes, thank you. So the glove works similarly to the ball, but there is one sensor here, which is the main one, which is the same that the ball has, which can track the position of the hand, basically. And so you can fake the reading of gestures. So it could be, like a circle. So if the ball gives like a full circle, it will change the sound. If you go to the right, it will do something that was the thing. And if you go to the left, yeah. So that's the same thing, right? And so the way I'm working with this one is, this might be super loud. So So basically, that's pretty much what it does. Let me turn this off. But I can show you how that looks in terms of the sound. So the hand, it's actually just activating here. So if I do, you can see that it's moving. That it's connected to a bunch of different triggers that will just create the different rhythms. With bigger speakers and a subwoofer, you can actually hear many more rhythmic patterns that are happening. So the other thing that happens is that there is this random object here that will choose randomly with a set of 418 different possibilities, basically, these three numbers. So whenever any of these three numbers get triggered, that will create another sound. So the only thing I'm just doing with the hand, it's just trying to find a place where I'm starting to get that rhythmic pattern that I like. So it's really, even though I've been playing this with this for a year, I don't always get the same thing. You know, I can kind of find it like, okay, yeah, here, but it depends if I do it fast and then slow and then super slow. It's like, so again, the idea of just being present.
Matias, thank you so much. I'm going to find my turn. Amanda, what would you? I was going to ask, just in terms of groups of individuals that you're working with, what other kinds of children, obviously dancers, people the streamer songwriters, what are you thinking about in terms of other kinds of populations to engage with more your process of research?
Yeah, so yes, thank you for that. Basically, I've been trying, it's just a matter of me finding the time and energy, but I've been trying to really work with the NTID in Rochester, because I feel like I've been looking at the interpreters when they do, interpretations for deaf people, when somebody's reciting a poetry or singing a song. And what they do with the hand, it's so beautiful that I feel that only, can be really like a whole performance. And so how can you get those gestures to become sound, basically? So my idea is that I can work with interpreters, but at the same time, deaf people, because they know the signs, right? So that would be, to me, that would be amazing. So at some point, I hope I can do that. No.
But she might be someone that interested in.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about if your improvisational sort of composition that's happening with these sensors, does that ever spill over into your traditional composition? Like, does something like this, something happen, you go, ooh, I want to take that and see what happens when I do something with my guitar or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it has happened many times. Because basically what I always share is that I was born as an electric guitar player. And by that I mean, I've been surrounded by effect pedals my whole life. So to me, the sound has always been modified by something. So because of that, I think, when I'm trying to exploring and researching like something and trying out different motions and different sounds and how I can create this thing and blah, blah, many times I found those sounds that it's like, oh, this is so good, right? And so I had the opportunity to bring those sounds, and sometimes it's just the effect but with the certain parameters that I know that will recreate a sound. And so I bring that to a more traditional kind of setup or composing. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you so much.